Hello and welcome to this continuing series of Introduction to Vectorworks. So what I would like to do today is we'll talk a little bit about the screen layout and the drawing layout. So let's just jump right over into it. Okay, so when we open our drawing, this is the general, this is the space that you will see. And I just want to talk a little bit about the layout. So across the very top up here, you will see the Vectorworks logo, and it'll say Vectorworks, and your edition will probably say Designer 2021 or whatever version we're currently working on. And we'll talk more about that. And below that, then we have the menu bar, right? So the screen is laid out in a series of bars and palettes. So we have a bar across here, which is our menu bar, which should seem relatively familiar. It has File, which is where we did open and close, and save and copy files, and there are some settings, and we can go through more of those as needed. Next to that is going to be our edit and view, modify, model, spotlight. We just keep going all the way across, and these are fairly, this should be common across Microsoft Word or Excel, the idea that there's a pull down bar at the top. Okay, so now below that we have this little tab which is the name of our file. We can open multiple files at the same time, and so every time that we open a file we'll get a new tab over here that will indicate that we're, which drawing is we're working on at any given time. So the little tab indicates which file we're working on. Below that is what's known as the view bar. And the view bar allows us to do a lot of different things. If you look across here, this is classes. This is also active class, layers, look at the working plane, how we interact with the working plane. Again, the specifics of all of this we'll go through in greater detail, but this is how we view our drawing. This is how we're going to look at our space, whether we look at it in 2D and 3D and what parts of the drawing we want to look at, how we want to organize it, and how we render it. That's the view bar. The next bar below this is the toolbar. Right? So if you'll notice, we've gone from the very general to how we view, and now we're coming down to a much smaller level. And the toolbar, which is this bar right across here, changes. And it changes with every single tool that we click on. Right? So any tool that I click on may have options about how that tool performs. And so the toolbar down here provides those options. The big giant area out here with the little blue lines and the grid, this is our drawing space. This is where we'll actually create things. All right. So now along the sides of the toolbar, there should be measuring grids. Don't worry if you don't have them. I will show you how to turn them on and off in another video. Right. But this is just measurement. This shows how big or how wide things are and where you are on the piece of paper that you're working on. Let's move to the left side. These are palettes. Almost everything else that we're going to talk about is going to be a palette. These menus that we're talking about up here, the pull downs, the view bar, and the toolbar, and the drawing space are fixed, and they're always going to appear in some version no matter what you do. The palettes, though, are changing and can be rearranged. They can be pulled out. They can be put in other places. You can organize your workspace however you want and then save that for future use. The first tool palette that we want to work with is called the Basic Tool Palette, and this one is universal to all. I'll go through the tools in a subsequent video. Below that are other tool sets, and by clicking on them, you bring them below the basic. It just opens here, and you can see if I open Events Design, it changes, Building Shell, 3D Modeling, visualizers, and then back to lighting. And that brings us back to here. There are two palettes, tool palettes that natively float. That would be the snapping palette and the attribute palette. I like mine floating. You may not, but we'll cross that a little bit more later. But the snapping palette and the attribute palette, and just by clicking on them, you could drag them and move them around the workspace to keep them out of the way. As we move to the right side, there are two palettes here. One is the object info, which is essential. It is the backbone of Vectorworks. It is where you can interact with shapes. You can define objects. And again, we'll get into that more, but the object info is here. And below that is the resource manager. And the resource manager, you could think of it as the library, right? It is where we store associated information, right? We can keep symbols there. There's all kinds of information that is stored within our resource manager, and it's essentially a library, a file cabinet full of information that we can add to our drawings. So that's a quick overview of our drawing space, and we'll do more in a little bit.